assembled on the apron. The band on the apron today represents the significant role that military musicians have performed throughout the recorded history for signaling in camp and on the battlefield. The United States Military Academy Band is under the direction of Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Esch and Drum Major Nathan John Eby. The reviewing party for today's review consists of Lieutenant General Robert Caslin, Superintendent, United States Military Class of 1975. Brigadier General John Thompson, Commandant of the United States Corps of Cadets, Class of 19, Sergeant Michael Ewing, Brigade Tactical Non-Commissioned Officer. Let's pass and review before the reviewing party. Members of each unit will turn their head and eyes and salute on the command, eyes, right. The marches that will be played as the cadets pass and review are National Emblem, the motto march written especially for the class of 2018 entitled With Strength We Lead, Washington Post,
Platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Gustav Dahl from Council Bluffs, Iowa. The platoon sergeant
sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Christian Calmus from Richland, Washington. The 3rd, Alexander Cobb. The 6th company is commanded by Cadet Captain Aaron Rounds from Shawnee, Kansas. The 1st sergeant is Cadet First Sergeant John Veldkamp from Grand Rapids, Michigan. The 1st platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant John Montgomery from Richmond, Virginia. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Michael Klein from Standardsville, Virginia. The 2nd platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Matthew Watts from Yorktown, Virginia. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Annette Yoon from Huntington Beach, California. The 3rd platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Brittany Lee from Sacramento, California. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Caleb Faber from Salem, Oregon. Since the days of the American Revolution, flag bearers have been an important element in ceremonies. At the center of today's formation and bearing the national colors is the United States Corps of Cadets and the 4th Class Color Guard led by Cadet Lovett Ledger from Lorena, Texas. Marching with the Color Guard is the Regimental Sergeant Major, Cadet Command Sergeant Major Jonathan Cheatham from Richmond, Virginia. The 3rd Battalion is commanded by Cadet Captain Nathan Pauls from Boise, Idaho. The Battalion Sergeant Major is Cadet Command Sergeant Major Christopher Wilson from New Orleans, Louisiana. The 7th Company is commanded by Cadet Captain Christopher Clarkin from Charlestown, Rhode Island. The 1st Sergeant is Cadet First Sergeant Cameron Rabaugh from Convoy, Ohio. The 1st platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Marissa Carp from Savannah, Georgia. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Nicholas Schwartz from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The 2nd platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Rachel Sawyer from Greenville, North Carolina. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Carolyn Baca from Newport Beach, California. The 8th Company is commanded by Cadet Captain Brandon Muller from Fort Washington, Wisconsin. The 1st Sergeant is Cadet First Sergeant Christine Rivera from Las Vegas, Honduras. The 1st platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Matthew Benjamin from Fairfield, Pennsylvania. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Peter Merlick from Granbury, Texas. The 2nd platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Shauna Moore from New Hampshire. The 3rd platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant William Lynham from Chicago, Illinois. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Alexander Weiser from Jackson, Mississippi. The 9th Company is commanded by Cadet Captain Gabriel Band from Wichita, Kansas. The 1st Sergeant is Cadet First Sergeant Emma Hanna from Charleston, West Virginia. The 1st platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant William Wilcox from Cincinnati, Ohio. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Tristan Sipar from Billings, Montana. The 2nd platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Jonathan Morton from Cambridge, Ohio. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Dominic Clark from Las Vegas, Nevada. The 3rd platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Braden Bell from Bend, Oregon. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Peter Worrell from Spokane, Washington. The 4th Battalion is commanded by Cadet Captain Philip White from Tyler, Texas. The Battalion Sergeant Major is Cadet Command Sergeant Major Colin McDermott from Belmar, New Jersey. The 10th Company is commanded by Cadet Captain Timothy Cook from Old Topham, New Jersey. The 1st Sergeant is Cadet First Sergeant Christian Lessinger from Blythewood, South Carolina. The 1st platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Andrew Hicks from Germantown, Tennessee. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Ryan Wright from Mobile, Alabama. The 2nd platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Connor Eckert from Bridgewater, New Jersey. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Troy Schumann from Frederick, Maryland. The 3rd platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Aaron Schlenker from Kutztown, Pennsylvania. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Alex Miller from Elk River, Minnesota. 11th Company is commanded by Cadet Captain Jack Ward from Northampton, New Hampshire. The 1st Sergeant is Cadet First Sergeant Corey Pinkley from Fayetteville, North Carolina. The 1st platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Sidney Gonzalez Rosario from Dorado, Puerto Rico. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Michael Houghton from Arlington Heights, Illinois. The 2nd platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Hannah Fairfield from Cornwall, Iowa. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Joseph Rossi from Sabatus, Maine. The 3rd platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Andre Michelle from Dumfries, Virginia, by Cadet Captain Mitchell Sanderson from Waipea, Hawaii. The 1st sergeant is Cadet First Sergeant Matthew Gleason from Knightdale, North Carolina. The 1st platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Brandon Court from Phoenix, Arizona. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Addie Henley from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Stephen Bouchol from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Beret Kalian from Blythe, California. The third platoon is led by Cadet Lieutenant Kirsten Spencer from Wawa, New Jersey. The platoon sergeant is Cadet Sergeant Joshua Mooney from Sparks, Nevada. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the playing of the official Army song, The Army Goes Rolling Along. Feel free to sing along as it is played.